Poverty trends now in South Africa. A report released yesterday which provides a comprehensive look at the state of absolute poverty in the country between 2006 and 2023. This is the first major update on these trends in several years and offers a complex, two-sided story of significant progress juxtaposed with deep entrenched challenges. Let's unpack what that really means. Isobel Frye, Senior Policy Advisor at Oxfam South Africa, joins us now. Isobel, good to have you, and thank you very much for your time. We've had this conversation, I'm sure, a number of times, especially when we talk about treasury efforts by government to fight poverty and so on and so forth. But we're getting the latest update now of the poverty situation. Are we making significant progress? Are we regressing, or are we just simply stagnating?
Thank you very much, and thanks for inviting me to have this conversation. As your headline says, it really is a grim story that Stats SA shared with us yesterday. We know that 2/3 of South Africans live below the upper bound poverty line, and that poverty line has just been updated to 2,600 Rand per person per month. So we see ourselves as a country of progress. We see ourselves as a country of a fine constitution, great laws, and yet the reality is that more people are living in poverty than are not living in poverty. So the question has to be, what is to be done about it? I think just to give readers an insight, what has been interesting about this poverty trends report is that the poverty line, for the upper bound poverty line, has been significantly increased from 1,500 Rand per person per month, which is what the 2023-24 figures were based on, to 2,600 Rand. So there is a recognition by Stats SA and by government that the cost of living has really impacted on people's realities and people's living. So I do want to commend government and Stats SA for taking this line. They could actually have given us a much lower poverty line, which would have reduced the number of people living in poverty. So I think that this indicates that government is looking at what is out there and is now, we need as people, as civil society, as the electorate, to say to government what's going to be done about it. That's the one hand I wanted to say, Thabo. But the other thing is, we've been working throughout this year as South Africa at the G20 on inequality, and we had a significant report which was handed by Nobel laureate Professor Stiglitz to the president for the G20 on inequality. I think we need to recognize in a country like South Africa that inequality is one of the key reasons and sort of drivers of poverty as well. So we have people living in extreme wealth, and then we have 2/3 of people living in poverty. So the kinds of interventions we need are not just the targeted, the poorest of the poor, because the poorest of the poor are actually the bulk of our population. We need to be looking at structural changes which not only look at taxation, so to create more revenue for the state so they greater spend on social services, by taxation of the super rich, but also looking at the kinds of the mechanisms by which income gets into households. So we know that unemployment is increasing and is looking at sort of between 35 and 40% of the population. So if salaries are not going to be the way in which most households get income, then we need to look at the alternative. And you know, you and I have had conversations around social grants before, around the need for looking at universal basic income. My point is, where poverty is the norm, we have to flip our entire approach to dealing with it.
That's what I want to just talk about. I mean, we suffer from analysis paralysis, others say, in this country, where there's no shortage of reports. There's no shortage of things that tell us what is it that we are faced with, the state of poverty in the country and so on and so forth. But is there an intersection here between what government is doing or what government is not doing, what government is putting in place in terms of framework and regulations, and what they are not putting in place to the situation being the way that it is?
I like that poverty, and poverty analysis paralysis. I think you've just condemned my entire sector of researchers and analysts. Taba, it's not an easy solution because as government, they would be looking at medium to long-term interventions. So that's looking at fixing the economy so that greater levels of jobs and better paid jobs are created on the one hand. But what our messaging has been consistently is that has to happen, but the government needs to address the realities on the ground. And therefore, we have to ensure that the constitutional promises of a life of dignity and a life of equality are met every day for every person right now. And that's where the acknowledgement of the severity of the crisis that we're in has to lead the kinds of solutions that we're going to be given by government. I mean, we almost midterm in this administration, we would imagine that the promises of the Government of National Unity of finding better solutions for more durable changes need to be coming through. So I think we need to start looking at the budget, which will be tabled in February next year. I would imagine that many people will be expecting a far greater allocation to go to the social wage because government's own figures are just talking about the dire state of people's existences. And we know that during COVID-19, during the COVID pandemic, government acted with a kind of nimbleness, which many people were surprised by. And I think we need to see that coming through now. One of the recommendations of the G20 Inequality Report at a national level is the development of a national inequality plan. I would really believe that that needs to be linked with poverty interventions. And I would also think that we would need to have a lens that looks at all policies and asks the question, to what extent do these reduce poverty and inequality? And to what extent do they not? I mean, I think poverty can no longer be an sort of additional thought, but addressing poverty needs to be what goes to the heart of our of government's delivery of services to people. So yes, we need to be looking at creating jobs, but that's also a very complex geopolitical challenge as well. And we know that the Trump administration, the tariffs that are coming through and embarking on trade are going to have a knock-on effect. So what are the interventions that are under our control? And that is raising additional revenue through greater taxation and having very clear allocations that take money out of the hands of any kind of intermediary, but give money to the hands of people who need to survive, who need to support local economies, and who need to have the kind of assurance that if they use the money to create jobs, to create further additional income, it's not going to be taken away. So doing away with the means test is something which has been a call on government for a very long time. We need to encourage people's innovation, encourage the kinds of look at the obstacles in the informal economy. Say people are currently doing livelihood activities now. How can we support them where they are?
Right.
Rather than say, let's wait until jobs are created, until we have additional online sectors. That's medium to long term, but the changes that we need to make right now are, again, these are not new changes. We've had many people calling on this for the longest time, but the severity of the problem, as outlined by Stats SA release yesterday, suggests that a caring government, which we know our government to be, really needs to step up and put the kinds of interventions in place that puts bread on people's tables today.
Appreciate your time, Isobel Frye. Thank you very much for coming on, Senior Policy Advisor at Oxfam South Africa. They're on the latest report from Statistics South Africa on the state of poverty in the country. Well,